Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Stanley number 2060R. This is a spring hinge, is what it is. This is specifically shown in the 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch 2060 satin chrome finish. When it comes from the factory, it's generally a little bit like this, not fully open. There might be a small amount of tension on the hinge. Be normal. You'd be able to easily get that installed. A 3.5 inch hinge like this is going to be intended for 1 3/8 doors. You could potentially use it on a thicker door, but 3.5 by 3.5 is the right size hinge for an 1 3/8 door. On a hinge like this, the height is the first dimension, so we'd call it 3.5 inch tall, and then it's 3.5 inches wide when measured open and flat. Available in all of the common sizes, 4x4, 3.5, 3.5, 4x4, 4.5x4, and 4.5, 4.5, and all the common finishes as well. This is going to be ideal for use in any sort of door that you need to have self-closing. A 3.5 inch, like this example, would be appropriate. Maybe you have an 1 3/8 solid core door on a attached garage to the home. You want that door to be closed. Normal application. The 4.5 by 4, 4.5 by 4.5, commercial applications potentially. Okay, very nice quality hinge by Stanley. Now, you're going to get a hinge. They're sold as each. When you buy one, you'll be sent one. You're going to get an Allen wrench, and we're going to go over that in a moment. You're going to get a package of screws, machine screws and wood screws. There's also one single odd screw in there, and it will look different than all the rest, and that is to be addressed later in the installation instructions that we're about to go through. Stanley is a comprehensive manufacturer of all things hinge related, so let's start with the installation instructions. So there's a link below this video to those, and they're real handy. With every order, you'll get at least one Allen wrench. To set the tension, you'll insert that Allen wrench into the hole in the top of the hinge, and it will seat, and you simply turn it clockwise when the tension collar, it's different than the bottom, is pointed towards the top of the door. And you can hear a ratcheting sound as it does that. Okay, that sets the tension. Now I've got 3 clicks of tension set on there, and I would not be able to pull that apart at this point. The next step in the installation instruction, it shows how to decrease the torque. Same tool, you insert it and you push it down, and then you turn it backwards. And really what you end up starting to do is giving it, when you push it down, you turn it back clockwise a little bit, and then it will release and go counterclockwise for you to remove the tension that had been set on there. Yeah, a little tiny, tenth of a turn sort of situation is how that works. But the key is you've got to push down. There's a small amount of movement when you push down on the Allen wrench, about 1/8 of an inch. And that's the key to get it to remove the tension. You've got to push down. Okay. Now that screw that we had mentioned is step 3. That it just threads into the top here, and it's an anti-tamper, anti-vandalism sort of feature that is appropriate for hinges like this. Now, regarding spring hinges, regardless of the size or the finish of the spring hinge, I'm a fan of having all spring hinges, or more than possibly what's necessary. Here's what I mean. First of all, you can mix and match the size of the spring hinge with a standard commercial grade hinge from Stanley, let's say. So if you had a 3.5 inch full mortise hinge, you could use 2 spring hinges and 1 regular hinge. Same goes for the other sizes. It's because that vertical axis of pivoting is compatible, or plumb, all the way down the face of the door. Guidelines in terms of how many spring hinges to use. Well, it depends on the size, but let's say if you're dealing with a 50 to a 70 pound door, 2 spring hinges. If it's lighter than that, you could probably get away with 1, but that might be unusual. If you get into the 90 pound and plus range, you're going to be looking at 3 spring hinges for sure. Now, I'm a fan, again, of all spring hinges, and here's why. I don't believe that spring hinges are the best way to actually control a door in terms of its closing cycle. It's just a spring. There's stored energy and it just will want to close the door. I believe that hydraulic control, like a door closer, surface mounted, overhead concealed, floor closer, is superior because it is. You can hydraulically control how the door moves through the opening, the closing cycle. A spring doesn't give you that sort of control. However, there are instances when a surface closer or others is simply not an option. You might have a very unusual ceiling, wall condition that precludes the installation of a door closer. It could also be economic. The fact of the matter is, a spring hinge is relatively inexpensive compared to an entire door closer, etc. Your application may not simply require a hydraulic door closer, and spring hinges fill that need very well. But because of the nature of what they are, they're not always incredibly predictable and effective and reliable, especially in those instances where you don't have ample spring power on reserve. So if you're on the borderline of those weights discussed earlier, immediately add an additional spring hinge. Start at the top, go to the middle, bottom at the very least. Now Stanley says that spring hinges are for doors up to 180 pounds, and while that's certainly correct because that's their specified limit for the hinge, I couldn't imagine using a spring hinge on such a heavy door. You've got to get that door moving closed and with enough energy to get it all the way latched and closed, and that's 180 pounds moving in a direction of close. I like having more spring hinges because when I've got more springs on the door, I'm able to share that workload across all of those spring hinges rather than taxing one hinge excessively or having to set the tension so high just to get the door when it's in the open position to get from a dead stop started closed and then to limp all the way closed with enough inertia to get it to latch. Generally what has to happen is you have to set the tension so high that it slams or it will bounce back open or it doesn't make it all the way. You can even hear the spring hinge, the spring inside of here contort when excessive tension is set on it. However, in instances where I've installed spring hinges and maintained them, adjusted them, I have found greater success at getting the door to reliably close and latch every single time when you've got more spring hinges. And if it's a fire-rated door, the fact that it must latch is equally important to the fact that it must close. An unlatched fire-rated door is not a fire-rated door, so keep that in mind as well. I liken it to a tugboat. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight, and having additional spring hinges on reserve is like that tugboat. It can just get the door pushed closed reasonably well. Also, you might contend with different air pressure conditions. In the summer, in the front door of the condo, the 3-flat condo building, the back windows are open, and that door will just slam shut. Well, you can release the tension, to a certain extent. In the opposite climate, everything's buttoned up. You might have to increase the tension a little bit as well, whatever the case might be. Again, the name Stanley is synonymous with all things hinge related, not only relatively common spring hinges like this, but everything commercial, architectural. They even get into a lot of materials specifically engineered for prison sorts of applications, heavy, thick hinges, but then of course a comprehensive offering of residential as well. If you have any questions on the Stanley 2060R spring hinge or any other Stanley product, please feel free to reach out to us.